A few years ago, when I was 20, I was coming home from watching the Navy Pier fireworks in Chicago on New Year's Eve with some friends. I was living with my older sister Olivia at the time. However, she was heavily pregnant and stayed home that night. She was 8 months along and couldn't handle the crowds. My friends and I all lived in very different areas and left separately around 12:30 a.m. The Uber wait times were over an hour and surge pricing was through the roof on New Year's Eve, so I walked home through the snowy streets. When I passed a bakery on State Street, I noticed a guy across the street. I only looked at him briefly, but something in the way he quickly looked up at me caught my attention. I hurried on anyway, because I'm usually paranoid about things, and most of the time it's just me being paranoid. I kept walking west through River North. The streets were still busy with drunk people waiting for Ubers. Every time I looked back, I saw the same figure about a block behind me. After 4 blocks, they were still there, keeping the same distance. I picked up my pace, taking longer routes between blocks to see if they were really following me. They were. Once I got into the quieter residential streets north of Chicago Avenue, everything got darker and emptier. The bars and crowds were behind me now. I kept checking over my shoulder, but couldn't see anyone anymore. That made me more nervous. The streetlights were far apart. When I reached a section where 2 lights were even further apart, I spotted something on the path ahead. I couldn't tell what it was in the darkness, so I stepped onto the street to avoid it. As I stepped onto the street, I turned slightly and saw who I think was that same person behind me again. They weren't too close, but they weren't too far away either. My heart leapt into my throat because they'd gotten that close without making any sound. When I told people about this later, they said I should have been suspicious then. Someone walking quietly behind a girl, not even bothering to keep a safe distance. No innocent person would do that. I couldn't see who it was, nor could I tell if it was male or female, because in the darkness, they were just a black silhouette to me. It was a very brief glimpse. I was scared though, so I whipped out my phone to call for help. The cell signal kept cutting out. I tried a few different times, getting increasingly anxious, but daring not to look behind me to see if the figure was still there. When I finally reached my street and got to my driveway, I hurried up it, thinking I was safe. But as I was halfway up, I looked over my shoulder again, just really quickly, and I saw the figure there again. I couldn't tell if they were just passing by or about to step onto the driveway. Something about their movement seemed threatening. My pregnant sister Olivia had stayed up waiting for me, knowing I'd be walking home alone. She opened the door immediately. She told me she'd been worried. Inside, I was about to turn off the porch light, but Olivia stopped me. She suggested we keep it on for a while, just to be safe. I got some water while she went to lay down in bed, then went to take a shower. Near the end of my shower, I heard something. It didn't sound like the usual creaking of an old house. The way I described it to other people was like someone trying to jump up and grip the windowsill from outside, like they were testing if they could lift themselves up. I immediately turned off the water in the shower and crouched under the window, hiding. After a long silence, I crawled out and switched off the bathroom lights, standing and listening in darkness for a moment. I needed to get dressed, so I turned on the heater light, which is much smaller and dimmer. That's when I heard slow footsteps outside in the snow, moving along the side of the house. They stopped towards the back of the house, at the side rear entrance. I could faintly hear the door handle rattle. I switched off the heater light immediately and backed into the corner, still wrapped in my towel. The footsteps started again, continuing toward the front of the house. I waited in the darkness, listening to them pass by the bathroom window. When I couldn't hear them anymore, I thought maybe they'd gone. I left the bathroom and started heading to my bedroom. That's when I heard the front door handle rattling. Someone was trying to get in. I ran straight to Olivia's room. I burst in trembling, telling her someone was outside at the front door, trying to get in. She could tell how scared I was. she heard footsteps running away in the snow. I'm glad she heard them because sometimes the whole thing feels so surreal that I wonder if I imagined it. I couldn't sleep that night. Even when morning came, I was terrified. That was when I realized my two big mistakes: walking home alone at night, and worse, leading them straight to my house. Once they saw me go inside, they knew exactly where I lived. I decided then and there that I would never walk home alone at night again. And if I ever think someone's following me, I won't go home until I'm sure they're gone. We never found out who it was. Some people think it was the same person from State Street, but something tells me it wasn't. New Year's Eve back in 2015, my bestie Chloe invited me to celebrate with her at Byron Bay. I was home for the summer holidays from uni, and Chloe asked me to come along and bring in the new year together. I didn't have any other plans, so I decided to go with her. We went to Byron Bay, about 2 hours from where we lived, a place known for its beaches and laid-back atmosphere. We planned to have a pretty calm night, enjoying the Soul Street Festival in town and having a few drinks at the bar. Since New Year's in Australia is during summer, we set out to enjoy the beach and everything Byron Bay had to offer. Around 7 p.m., we ventured from our Airbnb, walking to the festival under a kilometer away. On the way, we passed by a bar that was packed with people. We decided to stop in and spent about 20 minutes dancing, but didn't get any drinks. We continued to the festival, where there were food stalls, live music, and a huge crowd. After grabbing some dinner and a glass of wine, we spent a couple of hours listening to music and soaking up the atmosphere. Once we started feeling a bit tired, we decided to head back to the bar and hang out there until midnight. Once we got there, Chloe bought us both a drink. It was about 10 o'clock at this point, and we were enjoying our drinks and having fun dancing. I let her try my drink since it was one she hadn't had before. I constantly have my guard up when drinking in public and made sure to keep an eye on my surroundings. At least I thought I did. The place seemed relaxed, and I didn't notice anything unusual. I went back to the bar to get a second drink, and that's the last thing I remember. The rest I've gathered from Chloe. Almost immediately after getting my second drink, I told Chloe I wasn't feeling well. I'd been fine just 10 minutes earlier. Once in the bathroom, I collapsed on the floor and was almost unresponsive. Chloe somehow dragged me out to where security was. They assumed I was just drunk and told us to leave. Chloe decided to take me back to the Airbnb. By this point, I was unconscious and barely making any sounds. She noticed a man leaving the bar at the same time as us who stayed close by, but she was too focused on keeping me upright to think much of it. At one point, I vomited everywhere, on myself, on her, and all over the footpath. Still struggling to carry me, the man who'd left the bar approached us again. Without asking, he grabbed my other arm and lifted it over his shoulder, positioning himself on the opposite side of Chloe. I was slumped between them, completely out of it. Chloe told me later how he kept making unsettling comments, insisting he was trying to help, and suggesting he could come back with us to make sure I was safe. She tried to get him to leave, saying she didn't need his help, but he refused to back off. He stayed close, continuing to insert himself into the situation. Chloe told me it was obvious he wasn't just trying to help, and that his presence was making her increasingly nervous. She felt trapped, with me barely conscious and the man refusing to leave us alone. At some point, as we passed another bar, Chloe managed to flag down a security guard at the entrance. She explained the situation, and the guard stepped in, firmly telling the man to leave. Reluctantly, he let go and walked away, but Chloe said he gave her a look before leaving that made her skin crawl. Next, an off-duty lifeguard stopped to help Chloe on the street. She checked to make sure I wasn't in serious danger and helped Chloe get me to the entrance of our Airbnb. Once there, she propped me against the wall while Chloe unlocked the door. She left after making sure we were okay. As Chloe was about to open the door to guide me inside, She said she saw the man's reflection in the glass of the door. He had followed us and was standing just outside, waiting, probably to follow us in. Panicking, she screamed as loud as she could, catching the attention of nearby passers-by, including the lifeguard, who hadn't gone far. The man quickly ran off when others started looking. Chloe got me inside, locked the door, and she didn't see him again. I spent the rest of the night vomiting and dry heaving. By morning, I woke up on the bathroom floor with no memory of what had happened after that second drink. Chloe filled me in on everything. I'd never blacked out before, and the 2 drinks I'd had didn't make sense for me to be completely unconscious. We realized my first drink must have been spiked. Chloe admitted she'd taken a sip of it earlier and couldn't remember parts of the walk back to the Airbnb. We're convinced that the man was the one who slipped something into my drink. I don't know how it happened since I never set my drink down and got it directly from the bar. It's possible the substance was already in the cup. I'm lucky Chloe was with me that night, and that kind strangers stepped in to help. Thinking about what could have happened if they hadn't still terrifies me. I'm a student in Toronto and have lived in some dodgy student housing during my time studying. This particular house that I lived in was just off a really happening main road. For the first time ever, I was living alone, with no housemates to bug me, and my bedroom was in the loft. It was actually pretty decent having the whole place to myself, total privacy. The only problem was how empty and silent it got. I never thought I'd miss the noise of housemates until I actually needed someone else to be there. On this particular evening, I was planning on going out later to celebrate New Year's Eve nearby with my friends. I was getting ready to head out and was in the downstairs bathroom fixing some product in my hair. While I was doing this, I heard a loud thumping noise and some movement coming from outside. At first, I thought maybe it was just someone at the wrong place, so I walked toward the front door to check. As I got near the door, I heard voices that I didn't recognize and could spot the shapes of 3 guys through a frosted glass window. They were loud and wild, and something just felt off, so I kept quiet and slowly crept away. I heard someone trying to open the front door, testing it to see if it was unlocked. Then, suddenly, there was the sound of breaking glass as one of them smashed through one of the ground floor windows. 3 men came barging in, reeking of booze. From their shaky motions and slurred speech, I could tell they were totally wasted and probably jacked up on something too. They straight away started tearing through the living room, yanking open drawers and snatching anything valuable they could find. In a panic, I bolted up the staircase to my loft bedroom to stay hidden until I could figure out what to do next. I grabbed my phone and instantly dialed 911. I had to mumble to the operator what was happening and was told officers would show up in about 15 minutes. Those 15 minutes felt endless as I heard the mess and wreckage from below starting to move toward the stairs. The loft didn't have a proper door at the top of the stairs, just an opening. There was no way to block it if they decided to come up. Knowing this, I hauled every piece of furniture I had in the loft to the top of the stairs, making a blockade, and ducked behind it. As I sat there on the floor, barely breathing, with my heart pounding in my ears, I heard them trashing the last room right next to the staircase. The guys were shouting to each other about what stuff to steal, completely bold about the whole thing. These absolute maniacs were so confident and messed up that they didn't even try to stay quiet, which made them that much more scary. I have no doubt that if they'd spotted me, things would have gotten real rough. As it became clear they were about to come up to the loft, I heard the cops yelling and announcing themselves as they barged in through the smashed window. These 3 might have been zonked, but they knew what that meant. 2 of them dashed out the front door, but the 3rd guy smashed through a rear ground floor window and vanished over the back fence. I stayed frozen behind my blockade of furniture in exactly the same spot I'd been in for those endless 15 minutes, only moving when the police kept telling me that it was safe to emerge. The wreckage throughout the house was insane. It made me grateful I had somewhere to hide, but also showed how scary it was to be stuck up in the loft helpless. I gave my story to the police and then called my dad, completely rattled. I crashed at a friend's place for a few days while things got sorted, then found another spot to stay with some other friends who needed another housemate. Turned out I wasn't cut out for living alone after all. The privacy wasn't worth the fear. I only went back once to grab my stuff, which luckily hadn't been stolen. This was probably one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me. The guys were never caught, and the landlord tried to make me keep paying rent after I moved away, mentioning the contract. Well, forget that. I told him exactly where he could stick his contract, and that was that.